Welcome to Giant Leap's Member Spotlight Series. I'm George Naroyan. Today, I'm talking to Rachael Radford. Rachael is the owner of Meira Consulting, which is based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Meira helps companies select and implement a range of software solutions in Canada and the US, mainly for private companies and also municipalities. Rachael has a real passion for helping people work through the technology adoption process, which, as probably everyone listening to this knows, can be maddening. Welcome, Rachael.
Thank you, George.
So you have a very interesting story of how you got into technology to begin with, and I'd love if we just started with you telling me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely didn't start with technology. When I think back to kind of how I got into consulting and the software space, wasn't related to that at all at the beginning. It was really in construction. So I used to be a concrete form worker on high-rise towers, and then wound up getting into construction project management with engineering firms, and then just saw through the construction industry such a lack of use of technology. And I think, we haven't probably gotten as far along the path as we should in that space still today. But it really led me to think about what is the ways that we should be doing some of the improvements to process, and how can we leverage software, and what are the things we should be doing that would really move things forward quickly. And with that kind of background, I wound up going back to school and getting into international business management and trade and transport and logistics and all of these kinds of areas, and seeing where industries were really moving forward on the software and kind of consulting side of things, which is how I then eventually found my way to starting a consulting firm that really specialized in project management that leveraged a lot of software, and that got me into software consulting.
Okay, interesting. So I am curious, thinking about the construction industry, how much of it was sort of cultural to that industry? It's like, we swing hammers, we make stuff, we pour concrete, don't bother us with these software tools. Is that a part of it, or was it just not great tools available?
Yeah, it's both. Like, it's definitely a bit of both. And there's some, when we think about how that industry views itself and how others outside of the industry view it, there's still this old mentality around it being this, like, it's an old industry. It has old ways of doing things. People are resistant to technology. People in the field don't want to do it. And there's part of that is very true. Like, there's certain roles within a construction site that are always going to be, why would you want me to be on an app on my phone when I literally should be swinging a hammer right now? So there's a fairness to that. But I think also, because of this outside viewpoint of the industry, a lot of software companies aren't focusing on building products for them. So I think it's a miss on both sides.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great way to kind of transition into something that you clearly really love and are good at. And you mentioned that that you found your way to starting your first business, if I'm correct, in this industry. And what was that like? I think you had some partners in that. So say a little bit more about your own experience in building that business.
Yeah, it was quite a long time ago now. And when I was leaving school, my mentor at the time, Steve Turnbull, had kind of said to me, what are you going to do now that you're finishing up school? You're getting back into full-time work again. What's your plan? And I'd said, well, I'm really interested in consulting. Like, I love thinking about what a solution would be to a problem, all the ways that you could solve this. What's the way that makes the most sense? Like, I would love to get into that. And he actually picked up the phone and called my then eventual partners, Adam and Tim, and said, hey, I know you've started a consulting firm. You need another person that's going to be in on this with you. I know who that should be. You should take Rachael for coffee. And that's actually how it started. So it was we were very young. We were very naive. We did not know what we were doing in a lot of ways. But there were things that we did really know how to do. And we just kind of lucked out finding clients that happened to have that very specific problem. And that's how we kind of broke into the industry. Felt very much like sheer luck, and also a bit of like a puppet master in Steve Turnbull kind of connecting us in those very early days.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you joined together with two other people in forming the other business, or you started with them. And how long did you do that? How did that go? I think sometimes having three, were there just three of you owners or more? Or?
There were, by the time I left, I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and we had a couple of other minority partners that were involved at the time. And by the time I left was probably about 6 or 7 years into it. And by then we had about 24 or 25 staff. Had really grown the business. We had a couple of offices in Canada. We were thinking about starting one in the US. And I think, when you have partners, especially multiple partners, and there is just in terms of the decision-making model, like if you're not clear at the outset what that decision-making model is going to be and how you're going to balance different voices in the room, some of which are louder and some of which are more like viewing things in the same way, and people that view things differently, like that's, I think, where it was challenging with having multiple partners, is we didn't have clarity around decision-making authority in a way that would really leverage everybody's strengths and pull them into the right kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
And
how did you deal? Sorry to interrupt, but this is really interesting. How did you deal with that? Because you're you're trying to fix the airplane while you're flying. Yeah. Did you guys have open discussions about, hey, we need to figure out how to make decisions, or what did you do?
I think we definitely tried to. Like, there was a lot of open communication. I think as we added more people to that mix, though, it was harder and harder to really get clear on the same page about what we were trying to do. And there really came a point where, when events were taking place in the business, especially, HR events were happening, or there were companies that were reaching out asking if they could acquire us, or there were opportunities for us to really grow into new office spaces, and you had bigger decisions that were going to really impact you, like who's moving to Toronto to open that office, who's doing this thing, like who has to actually take that on and take ownership of it. Mm-hmm. And when those decisions would come up, it was not always based on what is best for the business. A lot of the time it came down to personal preferences. And as the owner, you have a luxury of being able to do that to an extent. But when you have partners, you got a lot of people that want a lot of different things. And if you don't know how you're going to make those decisions, you can just wind up making decisions that people don't agree with, but like have to kind of go along with, just because of the kind of voting shares and stuff like that. And that's where I think things fell apart a little bit for us, at least for me in that business. Like there was, a lot of really great work, a lot of things that we were doing that were wonderful. And there were also things that I just didn't like and didn't enjoy, and I didn't want to go down that path. And it was, when you think about partnerships like a marriage, and the end of a marriage or a partnership is usually really tumultuous. We did not have a super tumultuous exit. It was a very amicable, very open communication one. And I think that the reason it went there is because we at least were mature enough people and were clear enough about what we personally did and did not want, so that it was easy to have that conversation and come to the same conclusion. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were all committed to communicating as effectively as you could. And what I find interesting about that, because this whole topic of decision making is such a through line in pretty much everybody's entrepreneurial life. And as a company grows and changes, you bring on new owners or whatever you did early on that seemed to work and was pretty straightforward, you have to revisit it.
Oh, yeah.
But absolutely. It's, those process things are usually not the first thing we think of, right?
No. And, when we start, like even when we started that first kind of partnership with having a couple of partners, there was a lot we didn't know. So we didn't have good exit clauses. We didn't have good, like, this is how an exit will happen. This is how different people might come and leave the business and that kind of stuff. Like, we did not have that sorted out. And that could have made it so much harder to kind of have an amicable exit. And, at the end of the day, like somebody had to bend. It wound up being me to just be like, it's not worth the fighting about to me. I just would rather just go off and do my own thing and just have this end peaceably. And so that was a choice too, is like, there are things that you feel like you should be entitled to, or that, that you would like to see go in your favor. But at the end, you're going to make a decision. Is it worth that fight and the damage it could do, or am I just walking?
Absolutely.
And that's what it comes to, right?
Yeah. Okay, so close that chapter. You then started Meira a bit after that, if I'm right. So what do you feel like were kind of one or two of the biggest learnings then you took from your experience into Meira when you started it?
Yeah, I think when I'd left the previous business, I think one of the big aha things for me in leaving was I knew what I did and did not want to do in terms of what I would offer to clients. And one of my big reasons for leaving the previous firm is we had started becoming a reseller of specific licenses. So we were selling procurement software and implementing the backend config. And that's great. That's a wonderful business, great business model to be in. I found that really boring. You're doing the same thing over and over, and I can't provide unbiased advice. Like I can't actually say, I'm going to tell you which is the best procurement software for you because I sell three of them. I'm obviously going to sell you one of the three. And that just really didn't sit well with me in terms of being able to really support a client in making a good software choice, which is ultimately what I'm passionate about. So for me, when I left and started Meira, it was really about, well, I have to continue to relook at myself on like, what is it that's making me excited to show up to work and own a business and run a business? And I have to make sure that that is what I'm doing and that nothing else gets in the way of that so that I can, take on the risk of owning a business and still have energy at the end of the day after being an entrepreneur. I had to get really real with it. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So being sort of solution agnostic gives you a lot of freedom to do what you really like doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I get that. So, so have you ended up just owning Meira by yourself, or have you had partners, or how has this part of the journey been for you?
Yeah, I started a second company right in the height of COVID and brought in a partner in that business with the intention of being able to kind of run this kind of business with somebody else. And I think one of the big things, and it was an absolute disaster. It was over very quickly, thankfully, because I had learned my lesson about exit plans in contracts. But I think, going into that in the height of COVID, I also was having my first baby. It was a pretty stressful time. I was very worried about how the business would survive COVID and me as an owner being kind of trying to deal with a family life and all that kind of stuff, and didn't feel like I was going to be able to handle it all by myself, which is why I brought in a partner. And what I really found quickly through that process is we were not good at making decisions together. The decision-making process was incredibly slow. And when you're in a really tumultuous time like COVID and you're dealing with a lot of crises in the business, that is not the time to be slow on decisions. So I think that was a big thing that didn't work in that partnership, was just not having alignment about understanding what it takes to move quickly in a business, to meet the needs of clients that are changing on the fly. Like you really have to have a certain kind of mental model that you're working with. And that did not happen there. But it was thankfully a quick learning. And I got a lot of really great advice and support from yourself, George, from other members in our Giant Leap team for sure, to just navigate through like a really tricky time very quickly, which at least if you're going to fail, you're failing fast, it's okay. At Meira, though, in the 7 years now that we've been around, what I found really to be true, especially with that smaller experience in the mix of things, was just I really enjoy being able to make the decisions that I know are good for my clients and my staff, and I want to have control over that. And I've realized that over the 14 years that I've owned businesses is like at the end of the day, I want to make those decisions.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And so then you have the challenge and the opportunity then of building a team of people who can take on major parts of the business on your behalf, but also like having that sort of singular decision-making authority. How has that been, finding the right people, giving them authority so that they feel engaged in part of it without necessarily ownership?
Yeah, it's it's something that we talk about really openly across the team, because understanding what it is that somebody wants when they think that they want equity, is it that they want to take the risk on, which is a large part of what comes with it, or do they want decision-making authority, or do they want to be accountable for something, or do they want to have team report to them? Like, what is actually the thing that's going to fill them up? And then trying to find ways to do that instead of it just being a share. In our company, we do profit sharing, and that leads to some of the benefits that people think that they want with equity. And we do a lot of open decision making and discussion around like, what are we trying to accomplish with this? Should we do this? Should we do this thing or not? And like, have a lot of that kind of engagement with the staff, which really helps. And I mean, our team is an incredible team. You know, a lot of them have MBAs. They've been in business for many years. They've had very significant decision-making roles as GMs or other things in their, you know, past life. So have a really strong team to draw on in terms of their business acumen and how they think about things and how they can recognize what's good for a company or not and apply it to our own. So I kind of have the benefit of having a lot of that extra brain power that you would often need from a partner through my staff, and then also through kind of the peer-to-peer mentorship group that I'm a part of. So I kind of get what I need from those avenues without having to give up at the end of the day, being able to make a quick decision when I have to.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And this certainly comes up, especially in our smaller businesses, where really understanding what people want and need. Quite often it's said as I want ownership, but that isn't actually what they want,
Right.
because they don't want the downside. Oh, so you want to sign on the line of credit?
Yeah.
What they really want,
Do
like
you?
you said, is
Yeah.
they want to participate. They want to know that what they think matters. They want authority and accountability. They want to make a difference, and they do want upside. I mean, I think everybody wants upside, and so things like profit sharing, like you said, certainly make a ton of sense. So as you reflect on it, and looking into the future, you know, what's keeping you up at night? Where do you, you know, what's next for you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think, you know, things that keep me up at night. I think one
And
of
not
the
including young children.
Yeah, no, yeah, that happens for sure. But when I think about, you know, I spend a lot of time ruminating about the global situation, the economic situation here in Canada, our political situation here in Canada, and just the impact that that has on us as business owners and as people that want to really participate and see a real and, you know, wonderful future and want that for our kids as well. And so there's a lot of factors that are outside of my control that definitely keep me up at night. But I also think about, like, you know, at the end of the day, what is my purpose? And the purpose here at Meira is maturing businesses through software, through process. How are we doing that? And are we actually accomplishing that? And I think that those are some of the things that, you know, right now when we're seeing what clients have been going through for years, what they're going through with high interest rates, what they're going through in their economics and how it's impacting their business, and seeing what they're trying to do, and like, what is our role and should it be in helping them progress, is the kind of stuff that is like always living in the back of my mind. Is, given the situations that we're in and these external factors we don't control, what can we still do? What can we still control? How should we be maneuvering? And how can we help our clients think about that so that they're maneuvering in it as best they can too? And that channel of thought is never going to stop. So it's kind of like you know, steaming down the hill all the time. But it's something that's on my mind a lot right now, especially with a lot of, you know, big elections coming up and all of this other stuff. There's so much that can impact business and our business relationships in the next year or so. How do we prepare for that? How do we go through it? And then how do we come out the other end? And like thinking through all of the things that maybe we do have control over that we don't consider as like something we can control, and trying to think about what those things are to be proactive is a lot in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you and I and everybody listening to this share a great desire to get past this current election cycle in both the U.S. and Canada. Rachel, it has been really great to talk to you today. You know, I particularly enjoyed and appreciate your point about how critical it is to be clear about how are we going to make decisions, and how that does evolve over time. And sometimes a group of owners can get sort of run aground around that, and your choice to be the sole owner, so that when a quick decision is needed, you're able to make it, while at the same time really engaging the rest of your team to be part of that process. I think that's really terrific.
Thank you, George.
So thank you very much. To those of you who are listening, you can join the conversation about this interview on LinkedIn, and we always want to hear from you by email. So if you have any thoughts or questions, please email us at info@giantleap.com. Bye for now.
Thank you.